Hi, my name is Dr. Ron Eliasov. I'm a general internist living in Ottawa, Canada, and I've prepared a series of videos on the medical management of obesity. In this presentation, I'll be discussing the roles of genetics and the environment in causing obesity. The following slides show photographs of identical twins who were separated at birth. They had never met each other until they were fully grown adults. Clearly, genetics plays a major role in determining adult body weight. The set point hypothesis postulates that we have a biologic set point adipostat that determines our body weight in much the same way as we have a set point thermostat that controls our body temperature. I'm 5'8". I weigh 160 pounds. My weight is sometimes a bit higher and sometimes a bit lower, but it always gravitates back to around 160 pounds. 160 pounds seems to be my biologic set point weight. Rudolf Leibel is one of the world's foremost metabolism researchers. In this study, 18 obese and 23 non-obese subjects were admitted to the Clinical Research Center at Rockefeller University in New York City, and they lived there for several months. First, they were overfed until they weighed 10% more than their usual body weight, and then they were underfed until they weighed 10% less than their usual body weight, and they underwent extensive metabolic testing at each weight. What they found comes down to this. Let's take a man who, like me, is 5'8" tall, but his set point weight is 180 pounds, as opposed to mine, which is 160 pounds. Now, let's suppose he was placed on a strict diet and lost 20 pounds. So now we both weigh 160 pounds. In order to maintain his weight at 160 pounds, he would have to consume 15% less calories per day than me, and he would be in a constant state of hunger and dysphoria. In this follow-up study, they were able to find people who had actually lost weight and kept it off for at least 1 year. In order to maintain their weight loss, these people had to continue consuming less calories than would a person whose natural weight was lower. In other words, they may have been able to keep their weight off, but they had not developed a lower set point weight. This raises an obvious question. If it's all genetic, how can we explain our current epidemic of obesity? After all, the gene pool has not significantly changed over the past 40 years. The following slides show a series of obesity trend maps in the United States. In 1995, it was not at all clear if obesity was a cosmetic problem or if obesity caused health problems as well, and there was a great deal of debate on the subject. The Nurses' Health Study was specifically designed to answer that question, and the results were published in the New England Journal of Medicine on September the 14th, 1995. The Nurses' Health Study is one of the largest and most rigorous epidemiological studies that has ever been conducted. It was a prospective study of 115,000 healthy, non-smoking nurses aged between 35 and 55 from 11 Midwestern states who were followed over an average of 16 years. This was a remarkably homogeneous population, and precisely because it was so homogeneous, they hoped to be able to determine the health consequences of a single variable, and that variable was obesity. The BMI, or body mass index, is a measurement instrument that allows us to compare levels of obesity between people of different heights. It is calculated by dividing the weight in kilograms by the height in meters squared. So, if you are 5'8" tall and you weigh 145 pounds, your BMI is 22 and you are slim. However, if you're 5'8" tall and you weigh 230 pounds, your BMI is 35 and you are obese. The Nurses' Health Study determined that a person whose BMI was greater than or equal to 35 would be 93 times more likely to have diabetes than would a person whose BMI was less than 22. This shows the same information using a different format. The more you weigh, the more likely you are to become diabetic. Every time a person gains 12 pounds, they double their chances of developing diabetes. The Nurses' Health Study also showed that obese people have a much higher mortality, and they're much more likely to develop cancer, arthritis, gallstones, acid reflux, coronary artery disease, hypertension, sleep apnea, and dyslipidemia. And these are some of the cancers that have been associated with obesity. All of this inspired the war on obesity. These movements really took off in the mid-1990s, and I would argue that this was a direct response to the Nurses' Health Study. And a whole range of supplements and weight loss programs were heavily publicized and promoted. And there was a huge debate as to which was the most effective diet. Was it a low-fat diet or a low-carb diet or a low-calorie diet or a Mediterranean diet or a ketogenic diet? And studies were published nearly every week supporting one diet or another. And this was the result of the war on obesity. The methodology was changed in 2011, and so the graphs look different, but the trend continues. Why? I don't know why, but I'll share with you some current theories. The Thrifty gene hypothesis postulates that we evolved as a species to develop genes to enable us to cope with prolonged periods of famine, but they were never obliged to develop genes to cope with an oversupply of food. The Pima Indians are a group of indigenous peoples who have lived for more than 1,000 years in what now constitutes the desert regions of southern Arizona and the mountainous regions of northwestern Mexico. In the early 1900s, the Arizona group was exposed to modern Western lifestyles, while their Mexican counterparts weren't. The American Pima Indians now have one of the highest incidences of obesity and diabetes in the world. The luxury cruise hypothesis. When we go on a luxury cruise, we get to eat and drink to our heart's content with the expectation that we will gain 5 or 10 pounds that we'll probably lose when we return home. However, you could say that in modern Western societies, we are living on a luxury cruise 24/7. A few thousand years ago, when my ancient ancestors were hungry, they would sharpen their spears, chase down an antelope, kill it, and carry it back to their campsite to feed their families. When I'm hungry, I pick up the phone and call Uber Eats and order a souvlaki platter from Greek to go. We just didn't develop the genes to protect us from that. Or this, 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 or this. Rudolf Leibel, who I mentioned earlier as one of the proponents of the set point hypothesis, has suggested that while we may have an inherited biologic set point, the constant exposure to easy living may gradually, over time, drive that set point ever higher and higher. Processed foods are often implicated as major contributors to our obesity epidemic. The farther they are from their native state, the more processed foods are. This is a list of some commonly consumed processed foods. Just best to avoid these, just take a minute and go through this list. Bread, white rice, breakfast cereals, pizzas, soft drinks, fruit juices, hamburgers, French fries, even ketchup. Best to avoid these. I would propose that obesity may simply be the price that we must pay for the privilege of living in a modern Western society. So how can we stop this epidemic of obesity? I guess we could stop driving cars, turn off our cell phones, throw away our computers, stop shopping on Amazon, and stop eating processed foods. But frankly, I just don't think that's going to happen. If my ancient ancestor could have called Uber Eats, I don't think he would have grabbed his spear and gone after that antelope. We routinely prescribe medications to treat hypertension, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Even though each of these conditions could respond to lifestyle changes, we do this because we know full well that few people will be able to control these conditions over the long term with lifestyle changes alone, and we can always stop the medications if they do. We now have some excellent weight loss medications that are effective, safe, and well tolerated, and several more are on the way. Semaglutide is a very effective and well-tolerated weight loss medication. In this trial, semaglutide patients lost 14% more weight than did the placebo patients. Tirzepatide is Lilly's new diabetes and weight loss drug. It is similar to semaglutide, and it may be even more effective. It has been approved in the US, but not yet in Canada. 15 milligrams of tirzepatide resulted in a 20.9% weight reduction at 72 weeks. This is nothing short of spectacular. Bariatric surgery refers to a number of operations that have been specifically developed to enable obese patients to lose weight. The first gastric bypass was performed in 1966. Bariatric surgery has been extensively studied and researched over the past 60 years, and it should by no means be considered new or experimental. I discuss bariatric surgery in considerably more detail on another video. This is a photograph of Salem in 2016 before his gastric bypass, and 1 year later, by which time he had lost 120 pounds. This is a more recent photo. He has lost an additional 15 pounds since he was started on semaglutide. Renee had tried innumerable diets and weight loss programs before she decided to undergo bariatric surgery. This is a photograph of her 3 years after her surgery, and that's pretty much how she looks today. It seems almost sinful to have a treatment that both makes you healthier and makes you look and feel good. Before I finish this presentation, I would like to discuss some incredible studies that have come out of Scandinavia. In the early 1900s, Sweden was hit by the Spanish flu, and they went through a period of extreme economic hardship. Because of this, many Swedish women were forced to give up their children for adoption. This was especially the case for twins. Dr. Albert Stunkard compiled data from 247 pairs of Swedish twins who were raised apart and 426 pairs who were raised together. His conclusion was that genetics has a major influence in determining adult body weight, while the childhood environment simply doesn't. The CODAT twin studies is a massive international epidemiologic study out of Finland in which they are comparing over 250,000 twin pairs from around the world and monitoring their weights and BMIs on an ongoing basis. This is a list of the authors. And this is a list of the research centers. This is one huge undertaking. Their conclusion was that environmental factors shared by co-twins affect BMI in childhood, but little evidence for the contribution was found in late adolescence. This was the exact same conclusion that Stunkard had come to 30 years earlier. It would appear that genetics is a major determinant of adult body weight, and the childhood environment simply isn't. I would propose that there are two categories of the environment, the microenvironment and the macroenvironment. The microenvironment refers to the household environment. Both the Stunkard and the Kodat twin studies would suggest that if a thin couple were to adopt an infant who is genetically predisposed to obesity, that child would be slim until he became a teenager, at which time his weight would balloon up to match that of his biologic parents, who he had never met. And the microenvironment refers to everything else: cars, TVs, smartphones, and computers, processed foods, the constant bombardment of junk food ads on TVs, newspapers, and posters. It may be that the sum of all these outside influences may be more of a determinant of adult body weight than anything that we, as individual parents, can do. Maybe we can change our macro environment. Perhaps city planners can do more to make our cities more friendly to healthy living. There is a section of Berlin that has been closed to cars for several years. That change has brought 65% more visitors to the area who stay longer and spend more money. Like most countries, Denmark has experienced an increase in their levels of obesity, but to nowhere near the level seen in the US. Maybe it's because Denmark, like many European countries, has made efforts to make their cities more friendly to healthy living. Copenhagen is considered to be one of the best cycling cities in the world. In Amsterdam today, there are 515 kilometers of dedicated bicycle lanes. They have city bike stands on every second block in New York City. For a low rental rate, you can just hop on one of these rental bicycles and head off to work. Despite the notorious Manhattan traffic, there have been remarkably few serious bicycle injuries since the introduction of city bikes. One of my sons lives in New York City, and he routinely uses city bikes all the time. It's simply the fastest and most convenient way to get around the city. The Tour de l'Île in Montreal is an annual event that hosts about 40,000 cyclists every year. Ottawa is the best bicycling city in the world. We have 2 rivers and a canal with bicycle paths on each side. It is possible to go just about anywhere in Ottawa without confronting traffic. Senior Cycling is a bicycle touring company dedicated to senior citizens. Mark Troy and his team host groups of about 12 of us on 7-day tours to various locales in the United States and Canada. To access my other videos, go to youtube.com, enter Ron Eliasov, and tap on my photo. I can also be reached at reliasov@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.